supporting those who are in those professions that have to work right now. Even our bus drivers and meal preparation folks and everyone at APS who's still doing all they can despite school being closed. I first just want to say thank you and know that we are with you in solidarity to get through this. Also, I want to make sure that folks know that we appreciate you staying home. Now more than ever, this is the best way individually we can help, is to stay home if you can, and if you do need to go out, when you come back, practice all those good hygiene habits we've been learning, from washing your hands to coughing into your arm and so forth. These are so important right now. And I know for a lot of people who are working from home, it also means working from home with children. And I know there's a lot of us on conference calls with kids climbing all over our shoulders and in the background. And I just want to thank everyone for being patient with each other and for doing all they can to try and keep, in many ways, our lives running and also our city running. Now, like we did last week, we're going to take some questions from Burqueños. I want to remind folks that you can ask these questions and get information through our website, cabq.gov. You can always call 311. And you can also watch GOV-TV. Channel 16 right now has lots and lots of information and is very important. And since we're all at home, it's a great way to tune in on the big screen. So in order to answer as many questions as possible, let's go ahead and get started. And we're joined with our co-host, Alicia Menzano. Alicia, tell us where we're going to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Mayor, and so good to be here with you again today. And thank you so much for keeping the public updated as much as you are. It's really amazing to see how much interaction you're able to have with the public right now when they need it the most. So we're going to start with our first question. Is the city reporting who has tested positive? And should we get tested if we were potentially exposed to someone who did test positive?
It's a very important question in these times, as we know that as the numbers continue to grow, which we know in many ways is inevitable for at least a couple of weeks, we're all probably going to know someone or have been in the same room as someone who may have been tested positive or someone who's been exposed to someone who's been tested positive. So a couple of items here to really clarify this. You know, number one, of course, the state, city, and county are reporting the numbers of folks who've been tested positive. Because of HIPAA, basically healthcare right to privacy, you know, we're not sharing names and details of those folks, and that's standard for any medical issue of this nature. But we are working, the DOH, so the New Mexico Department of Health, they are working directly with these individuals. And so know that our State Department does know who these folks are, and they go through a process called contact tracing. And they work with the individuals who do test positive, and they reach out to folks who might have been exposed. So the State Department is working on all of that, and we're so grateful to have them and our Secretary Kathy Kunkel and her leadership for walking through that process. So know that all of that does happen, but it is not public, and rightfully so. So if you have questions on that process, please call the DOH hotline at 855-600-3453.
Thanks, Mayor. And you've previously mentioned the economic impacts that this may have on the city. So this question comes from Cameron. And they would like to know, how is the city doing financially, and how long can it sustain the stay-at-home instruction?
That's a great question, and it's one that as we think about recovery, even down the road, we're watching this very closely. We are hoping, of course, that this is about weeks and months and not years. And so in a way, that is a good thing, because we know that hopefully these are going to be short-term challenges that over several years we're going to be able to get through, and that includes financially. So right now, in short, basically there is, you know, remember, government is funded through tax revenue, no surprise there. And so if tax revenue goes down, then so does government revenue. So Cameron's question is very important, because right now, lodgers' tax is way down because, you know, we don't have tourism and people staying at our hotels as much. So is GRT, that's the gross receipts tax. And although we are buying a lot of groceries, those are actually GRT exempt. So right now GRT is way down. And so our city coffers are certainly being challenged. But there are a couple of silver linings here. Number one, We always budget for 1/12 reserves. We hold 1 month just in case of an emergency. So we do have that on hand, and that's a very good thing for our city. That's a little under $100 million. We have on average a $1 billion budget, so you can kind of do that math. Also, this federal program that just passed, and we really appreciate our federal delegation for their help on this. The city is estimating, it's very early right now, but we think we could get around $150 million of support from that. So we actually feel comfortable as a city right now as it stands financially, but we do know that we're not making any commitments on future funding in any way for any special project right now or any new program. I think it will be an ambitious goal just to keep doing what we've been doing in the past. And so that's our starting place, and we'll evaluate this one every 30 days as we go forward.
So our next question comes from Sean and Sally, and they would like to know, are there grants or other resources available for small businesses?
So Sean and Sally, this is a question we're getting a lot, of course, all across the country. And there are a couple of things to note. I think the best, most beneficial programs are certainly probably going to come from our federal government, even part of what was just passed, and also from our state government. So I would stay tuned for how they're going to be rolling out the different programs that have just been approved. At the city level, we're going to try and help. Now, because we're smaller than those other entities, there's a lot less to go around. But tune in Monday at 11:30, especially because this is a social media forum. If you just hit Facebook or YouTube or watch on GOV-TV at 11:30, we're going to be highlighting our city economic development work and our grant program on Monday. So stay tuned for that. Also remind folks we continue to raise money for this. If you're interested in donating or know folks, the short way to do it is just go to the onealbuquerquefund.org and you can donate that way to our economic recovery program. So details coming out on Monday with respect to what the city's doing. And I also do want to mention City Council helped us fast track a $500,000 marketing program for Route 66. So businesses on Central, we're now going to be trying to figure out how to kind of lift up Route 66 as part of our recovery. And the planning for that is now in the RFP phase. So if folks are interested in that, they can apply through the normal processes.
Thanks. So next question is, what is the city doing to slow the spread among the homeless population?
So the city's working very hard on this, and I want to acknowledge that in every city across America, we're all very worried about our homeless population. And this is something, as folks know, I've been pushing hard on a gateway center to really help get our homeless folks the services they need. That was just approved by voters in November. We're working hard with our partners to build that, but of course it's going to take still years to do that. So here's what we are doing today. Number one is we're keeping our West Side shelter open 24/7, and that's something we normally don't do. We're doing that right now in the time of Corona to provide a place where folks can go. We do have Corona screening out there, so and there's also quarantine ability because it's such a large facility. So we have all of that set up appropriately. And so that's a very good thing. We're actually ahead of most cities when it comes to how we're dealing with our homeless. And right now we're not maxed out in capacity. And of course, everyone who's working with our homeless population is providing all the guidance we can with respect to hygiene and sanitizing. And a couple of other things we're doing on this. We are also using emergency housing vouchers and motel vouchers. This is another area where we're asking folks to donate. We actually had a $50,000 donation from our Albuquerque Foundation to motel vouchers, because one way that we can help folks is that if they are diagnosed, they come down with Corona, or if they've been exposed, we want to separate them as much as possible. And the best way to do that is actually a motel room. So we have motel partners who are doing that. And so this is, again, a way we're a little bit hopefully ahead of the curve on this. But we know this population is at very high risk. And the last thing I would mention is that we are in daily contact with all of the other providers. The city contracts with about half a dozen homeless providers, from healthcare to the homeless to Heading Home, who runs our West Side shelter. And so we are daily making triage changes with how we're dealing with this population. We do want to get the word out, though, for homeless folks. It's very important that you check in with whichever facility you are most comfortable with. And so the idea of that you can just kind of, congregate or live out in the streets, it might feel isolating for folks, but we know it's not because they're going to get food and other items in groups. And so it's very important actually that we do that in a methodical, public health managed way. And so we do want to make sure that folks are trying to access all those resources they can.
Thank you. You've mentioned before that the city provides so many essential services, whether it be trash collection or public safety. Now this question is around non-essential city employees. So someone from the North Campus is wondering if the city will be extending paid leave for non-essential employees.
This is a great question, and the city has 6,000 employees roughly as an estimate, so we are one of the largest organizations in the state, and we're trying to role model how to deal with this. So we actually are giving paid sick leave to all employees regardless if they're essential or not. And so for us, we don't want any city employee to have to choose between missing a paycheck and staying home. And so for the foreseeable future, what we're planning for, we're going to be able to do that now. Obviously, if this just goes on for months and months, there's a different challenge. But right now, we're committed to doing that for the next few months.
Now, I forgot to mention at the top, we're so grateful for all these questions that have been coming through over the last several days. So we ask that if you do continue to have these questions, continue to send them our way. We're happy to do this in this format or otherwise. So thanks again for bringing your questions to the mayor. So the next one comes from Christine in the Northeast Heights. She would like to know, what advice do you have for people using parks and hiking trails?
You know, right now we're so fortunate in our city to be able to have so much open space. This is actually one of the best places to live in America when it comes to city open space. And so we're able right now to make that available to people. So go ahead and enjoy our open space and also our parks. Now, there are some rules of thumb that'll enable us to continue to do this in the future. Number one, if a park, for example, is particularly crowded, try and come at another time if you can, because we want to make sure that everyone can stay at least 6 feet apart, right? This is the rule of thumb. So when you go, you're hiking or you're at our parks, again, just kind of stay with your family group or whichever unit you're there with, and stay apart from others. Of course, wave and be nice and so forth. Enjoy walking your dog and riding your bike. But again, try and stay separate from folks. And also try and vary the time that you go. So it's actually great now to use our parks at sort of odd hours and so forth because there's less people there. And that's the same with open space too. As a reminder, the play structures are closed. So try not to use them. So is any other shared equipment like the exercise equipment or our water fountains. And so other than that, get some exercise, enjoy, and then go back home.
Now, Mayor, this is a question that we've been getting a lot and we hear a lot of conversation around, and this comes from Jacques in Nob Hill. What's being done about hoarding of supplies?
This is a good one, and I've been doing some shopping myself. It's actually something I do regularly for our family, and so it is fascinating how you go into our stores, and actually, as folks know, almost everything is there and well stocked, except for certain items, right, especially paper goods. And a couple of things, I do notice on the shelves, like I was able to get the tissues that have lotion because a lot of people don't like those, including myself. And so I got those with no problem, but everything else was out, So I do highlight this because in some ways it just speaks to this, right? This is an artificial shortage. If everyone just gets the amount of products they need, we have plenty in the system. If everyone thinks they have to get more than they need, that's why we have empty shelves. So this is a self-imposed issue for us, and I know it's hard. It's common psychology. But there are some rules now, and so we are beginning to enforce them. The state has enforced some rules that stores can only sell 3 packages to each customer per day of particular types of medicine and hygiene products, including toilet paper. And so I have been in conversation with all of our major grocery stores this week. And now we are sending out our environmental health department to check and make sure that they're following those guidelines. But again, those are actually pretty generous guidelines. So we'd really prefer it just to be 1 unit as a preference. So that's what we're doing right now. We also do have some increased presence from our fire department as well as our police department at our major grocery stores right now.
Great. So you activated the Joint Information Center recently, and you've been providing updates from various partners throughout the city. And I know last week we started getting some updates around hospital visitation. So this question comes from Elliot. Elliot would like to know, if a child is infected and hospitalized, will their parents be allowed to stay with them with the no visitor rules that are now in place at the hospitals?
You know, this one is really tough, and we know that in general right now being with loved ones is a real challenge. And especially, you know, if your loved one is sick and you're trying to visit them at the hospital, it's even more of a challenge. So the hospitals do have rules outlined for this, and while in general visitation is not allowed, they can walk you through perhaps some exceptions for children patients especially, and so also for folks receiving end-of-life care. So reach out to whether it's Presbyterian or Loveless or UNMH. They all have the visitation rules front and center on their website. And of course, take advantage of technology as best you can. So if you do get to visit them, make sure, if you can, try and set up a situation where you might be able to at least phone call or FaceTime and things of that nature. So talk to the staff about different ways to do that.
Now we know new orders are coming down from the governor daily or every couple of days, and this one around travel. This person has a question of, can they travel out of state?
You know, it's a very good question. I know for a lot of us too, the sort of, you know, sometimes state boundaries are meaningless in a sense that a lot of folks in the eastern part of New Mexico have family on the Texas side, and I know, you know, we in New Mexico like to view Durango as really part of New Mexico. You know, here's the reality. There is no ban on out-of-state travel. We are very much discouraging it though. And especially because we just don't know. So out of an abundance of caution, we're just discouraging travel. But we do understand, especially car travel with family and so forth, you know, it is permissible. And so use those same rules. Those hygiene rules apply. And again, especially be careful with elders. But I do want to mention, folks, air travel I really want to discourage at this time. It's really be only essential only, and again, because of the notion of sitting in that airplane and being in a public space, much different than just traveling in your own car. So, and there is a state order right now, if you have done air travel, you're supposed to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. So be aware of those restrictions.
Thanks. So we're coming upon our last question for the day. So this one comes from Will from West Downtown. And Will would like to know what the city is doing to protect renters.
So right now, there's been a couple of things that happened this week. First, the Supreme Court, they actually said that they're going to put a 30-day hold on all evictions. Now, you do have to demonstrate why you need that hold and why you can't pay rent. So I want to remind folks of a couple of things. One is that you are still supposed to pay rent. So just in general, like rules and laws still apply. That includes paying rent. However, if you're unable to do that, you can buy some time with respect to eviction proceedings, reach out to the Supreme Court, or give 311 a call for directions on kind of how to do that. But the city is trying to do a little more. So we have put up a rental assistance program. And that program is running out of, we have 4 facilities around the city, 1 in each quadrant. These are our public health and social service centers. And they're available for people essentially in really desperate need of a number of things. It could be a food box, it could be emergency hygiene products, it could also be rental assistance, it could be some other public health needs. And so these are open. You can find the locations by calling 311. Or looking at our city's website. And that rental assistance program right now has, I forget the exact number, but about $20,000 or so in it. You can reach out to those centers and try and get that rental assistance. This is another area where we're asking for donations. So if people want to help, they can donate to this program as well. Just call 311 for the details or look on cabq.gov. And again, there is a program, and as long as it has funding, we'll get it out to everyone who needs it.
Thank you, Mayor. So with that final question, I'll just continue to add, if you have questions of the mayor or of the city, you can always reach out in this format. You can also go to our website, cabq.gov, or call 311 with any additional questions. And with that, Mayor, if you'd like to say anything to close.
Well, we just want to continue to appreciate everyone, every member of our community for stepping up in every way that you can. Even if it's just staying home, even if it's you're essential and you've got to work, it's following those good hygiene practices. It's also just for being there for each other, whether it's calling a neighbor, a family, or a friend, trying to keep in touch. Even letter writing in these times actually can be a very therapeutic activity for both the recipient and the sender, and also just for everyone who's there, again, for their own children in these times when we don't have school and so forth, trying to keep them educated or just trying to keep them busy. Thank you. We're going to get through this, and we're going to do it as one Albuquerque, and we're going to be a better city coming out of it. And for now, keep in touch in all ways that you can, whether it's social media or it's our telephone town hall that we're going to be having next week, or tuning in each day at 11:30 for our media briefing and community briefing. So we hope to see you soon, 6 feet away, and right now enjoy our parks and open spaces. Thank you.